but it's crucial that we realize with everything that I've mentioned now, that the South African Police Service is a failed organization.
The South African Police Service is failing in its basic mandate. Why is this? Well, in this extract from an exclusive CRA client webinar, CRA analyst Gerbrandt van Heerden and our guest speaker Ian Cameron of Action Society give their view on the origins of the crisis in the police. If you enjoyed this analysis, please do give this video a like and subscribe to the channel.
Now, the riots not only demonstrated the growing desperation of South Africans in the country, but it also demonstrated the police's inability to curb crime and restore order. And for years, our police service have been characterized as either under-resourced, lacking expert skills, or even having some criminal elements within the ranks, within their own ranks. Now, this graph, for example, gives us a ratio of the number of people for every police officer. So in 1998, there were 361 people for every police officer in South Africa. And that figure has stayed largely the same, actually increasing a little bit in 2020, with the figure increasing to 400 people per every police officer. And what this basically tells us is that the number of South African police members have not kept pace with the growing South African population. There's less police officers to keep a larger population safe. And this also speaks to the limited resources that we find in the SAPS. Also, as I've mentioned, the SAPS have been increasingly being defined by criminal elements, and we can see this by looking at data from the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, or IPID. Now, in 2019-2020, there have been more than 5,600 complaints and notifications against SAPS members, with the overall majority circling around torture and assault. But some of the complaints and notifications also include corruption, domestic violence by a police member, rape by police officials, as well as deaths in police custody. And with the lack of resources and growing criminality in the SAPS, this has dealt a huge blow to the public's confidence in our police force. And we can see this clearly from this graph, which shows the change in the number of households which reported a crime to the police. So, for example, on the left-hand corner, we have housebreaking. And what this figure tells us about housebreaking is that since 2010, the number of households that experienced a housebreaking and that reported that incident to the police has declined by 14%. Expressed in another way, in 2010, of all households that experienced a housebreaking in 2010, only 60% reported that crime to the police. And that figure has since fallen to 50% currently. So only half of households still make the effort to report housebreaking. And I think this is very indicative of our population losing confidence in the SAPS ability to curb crime, and therefore they're not making an effort to report a crime to the police anymore.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
We saw during the looting that a shipping container was looted just a few hours after the content of the container was counted by police, and it was meant to be under police guard, and almost 1.5 million rounds of ammunition was stolen, and hardly anything has been recovered yet. In fact, Bheki Cele had the audacity to tell media about the breakthrough and the success that they had as they recovered a few rounds, but he failed to mention that the container was meant to be guarded by police. Take it a bit further and we look at the SANDF, and without getting into too much of a military discussion, They told Scopa in 2011 that they couldn't account for just over 80,000 firearms. And we've got more or less the same problem with some of the metro police departments. I believe the Western Cape and municipalities within the province are probably the ones that are the best managed, and we really see accountable firearm management compared to any other province in the country. If we take it a bit further and we talk about political interference, just yesterday, it was very alarming to see how Premier Zikalala and Bekitsele use the whole Phoenix situation without real factual data as a scapegoat for their own incompetence. I would actually want to emphasize that none of the violence would have happened had the security cluster just been competent. They didn't have to do anything special. They just had to do their jobs. They just had to be able to do proactive policing, intelligence-driven policing, and it shouldn't have happened. But they allowed people to discharge firearms in front of Nkandla. This could have helped the situation escalate. Had they acted immediately, they could have, first of all, prevented further problems, and so on and so forth. To conclude, before we do Q&A, I think for many years we've heard the South African Police Service and specifically figures like Bekitsele blame shifting the whole gun issue to private gun owners, while their own officials or members aren't being held accountable. In the last official training audit that was done in the police in about 2012, around those years, it found that just around 47% of gun carrying or firearm bearing police members in the Eastern Cape weren't competent to do so. Now, there are many reasons that it could be. They might not have had ammo, etc. But the point is they weren't competent, yet they're carrying a firearm. But legal firearm owners are being threatened. Now, interesting, and this is something that Heerden Uber has emphasized quite a bit. If you look at the Wits School of Governance report, it showed us that less than 5% of crimes that were reported to police had any form of relevance to the Firearm Control Act. So that tells us that the act itself and the so-called gun control in the negative sense doesn't really impact crime. In fact, it said it found it very difficult to find any reliable data that would indicate that the FCA had any positive influence on combating violent crime. To conclude, I think the South African Police Service, just as a side note, it used to be that once every year they had an annual training shoot, make sure everyone's up to date. About a year or two ago, they had another ammunition shortage in the police service, rather a supply chain issue. And it actually forced some members to buy their own ammunition to make sure they could work out on the streets. In fact, some flying squad units were taken off the streets where they were direly needed just because the police didn't have ammunition to do their competency shoots. To stop there, I think it's important to emphasize, and something that we've learned over the past few weeks, that the future of a safer, sustainable South Africa is strong and well-organized community structures. So we say that community safety initiatives must be well-organized, they must be done within the framework of the law, and they are a massive deterrent to public violence. We immediately saw that areas that were outspoken, well-organized, law-abiding citizens, guarding their property and their livelihoods, that looters would rather go elsewhere. And we want to encourage this, obviously, once again, within the framework of the law, but it's crucial that we realize with everything that I've mentioned now, that the South African Police Service is a failed organization. And if it's not restructured and a totally basic approach is followed to build it up again, we can forget about any decent support. You are on your own. You have to organize. You have to take hands where you can on ground level with law enforcement and work with private security institutions.
Thanks for watching. This is an extract from an exclusive CRA client webinar. If you would like to watch the full recording of the webinar, that's behind the paywall on our website. If you're not already a subscriber to the CRA, you can join us on our 30-day free trial where you can access this content as well as our other reports and briefings. My name is David Ansara. This is the Center for Risk Analysis. Until next time, take care.